into the chat so everybody can click that link and pull up the slides themselves as we kind of navigate through. So what I'm kind of thinking is, I know normally we were going to kind of maybe do like just the presentation and then ask questions, but I like to be kind of interactive. So if you guys want to interact and you want to ask questions in between, you are more than welcome to do so. I do have like some videos in that link and different, well, one video, not a lot, but just different things that we can kind of interact with together. So I'll go ahead and get started just introducing myself. If y'all want to click on the link and pull up just that first slide, if you will, I'm going to go ahead and do a little split screen myself so that I can kind of see you guys and the presentation. So my name is Buffy Andrews. I am the owner over at Madewell Center for Wholeness, which if you don't know what Madewell Center is, it is basically a holistic wellness center. I offer mental health counseling there, as well as small group yoga, fitness classes, workshops, and presentations. And it's just a kind of like all-encompassing mind, body, spirit type of place. So I'm the owner. I am one of the therapists there. I specialize in trauma, anxiety, and couples counseling. So if you guys, need any of that, or if you know anyone who needs that, I have myself and 2 other clinicians as well who are all working there. So I have a background in social work. So I got my master's in social work and have my yoga teaching certification and all that good stuff. So I really do try to encompass the whole of a person. So through this presentation today, I was hoping that we could kind of just talk about emotional and spiritual health through these different times of adversity. I know 2020 has not been everyone's favorite, so hopefully this presentation will give you guys a little bit of just a little bit more awareness of things that you can do to maintain your emotional and spiritual health, as well as just how to check in with yourself. So we'll just kind of go through the slides. So the next slide says emotional health and wholeness. So before y'all read, maybe, I would love to just kind of hear from you guys what your view of emotional health looks like. So if anyone wants to unmute themselves and kind of chime in, feel free. And if not, I'll just kind of move through, but I'll give you guys a second. Any takers on emotional health? That's all right. We'll dive right into it. So emotional health, as I kind of was like looking it up and just kind of like formulating my own, I guess, definition of it. The way we're kind of having a lens around emotional health today is just the person's ability to accept and manage their emotions or feelings through challenges or change. It's our ability to understand what we're feeling and navigate through these feelings without stepping outside of our window of tolerance. And then it also includes just both that emotional intelligence piece and your emotional regulation piece. So when you're feeling emotionally healthy and whole, again, it kind of encompasses all these different things. And then if we're thinking about spiritual health, the next slide down, spiritual health and wholeness is our ability to maintain a healthy relationship to the purpose that you hold for your life, along with how you determine or make meaning of your connectedness to God, self, or others. So spiritual health, again, can kind of look very different for lots of people. There might be, depending on your religious background or your belief system, but it's your ability to maintain that healthy relationship to that purpose, again, that connectedness to God or yourself or other people, right? The next slide down has a little statistic. It says 23% of Americans report feeling unhappy or unsatisfied with life as of June of 2020. And then I was looking into just kind of Lynn, sorry, if you go up in the chat, there's another link right there in the top of the chat. That's a Google Doc link. So I wanted you guys, so I didn't have to like screen share and kind of navigate seeing you and the screen. You can click on that link yourself and pop in. So Lynn, just feel free to click on that and let me know if you have any other questions. And yes, everyone also please use the chat for any questions like that. I'll try to keep both going. But I was just kind of thinking about like when we're feeling spiritually or emotionally unhealthy, it can be very difficult to understand why, right? I think we kind of get to these places where we're like, oh, like I just feel terrible. Everything's going wrong, or I don't feel connected. And then we kind of just sit with it, right? We don't often ask ourselves, well, like, why? What's going on? And I found this actually really interesting book called The Happiness Report. And they had a whole chapter in the Happiness Report about how Americans over the course of the last 10 years have really like decreased in their satisfaction with life. And I think a big part of that has been the increase of the digital age, right? So we're more connected than we've ever been, but we're way more disconnected than we've ever been at the same time. And, this statistic here, obviously, I think had a lot of factors going into it regarding COVID, pandemic, quarantining, hurricanes, the election year. There's a lot going on. So when we have all of this stuff happening around us in our world, it's really important for us to take that time to like tune in, to check in, be aware of our emotional, spiritual health so that we can navigate it properly. I think something that's really interesting, though, is that a lot of times, again, we often don't notice that we're maybe outside that window of tolerance, right? We don't notice, oh gosh, I'm losing my connection to self. I'm losing my connection to other people. And when we notice it is when things have blown up, right? So it's really important for us to pay attention to that window. And so if you go to the next slide, right after the statistic, it's got a little chart here, right? So this chart shows our window of tolerance. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard of your window of tolerance. I talk about it a lot with my therapy clients. But basically you've got this little graph, this little window here, right? And inside the window, that's where things are good. That's when you're meshing well with people. That's when you're feeling whole, when your heart rate's at a normal pace, right? And then if we go out of our window of tolerance, we have what's called hyperarousal. So this might be like heightened anxiety. It might be irritability, kind of. Do what? Was there a question? Sorry. I can't tell who was talking. But yeah, we might be like in that kind of heightened state of anxiety. We might be in, again, like that irritability kind of phase. You might notice things about your body, like you might notice that your heart rate has increased. You might notice that you're, sweating, or that you feel tense all the time, right? And then we have below our window becomes our hypoarousal, where we're not as aroused as quickly as maybe we need to be to function well, right? So hypo might include like states of lethargicness, or feeling more depressed, or feeling just unmotivated, right? That's when maybe your heart rate's like a little too slow and it's hard to kind of get you up and going in your day. So again, this is kind of our window of tolerance, and it's when we get out of this window that we have to start paying attention to what's going on, right? When we notice our heart rate is really high, when we notice we're sweating profusely, when we notice we are not able to get out of bed in the morning, right? That's when we have to kind of take a step back and recognize, whew, okay, like I'm not functioning at the place that I want to be functioning at. So how do I get back to that window of tolerance? And something that we're going to kind of focus on a little bit here in this presentation is the idea of like being heart-centered, because I think being heart-centered is really important for us to notice, again, how to be that kind of emotionally and spiritually healthy self. And I found a really cool video that I think has a really good depiction of understanding the heart and a little bit of the science behind it. So what I'm going to do is I want you guys to click onto the next slide, and it says it's a little video clip, and you should be able to click on the video. Let me know if you can't, but it's a 3-minute video. So we're going to watch this little 3-minute video together. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to just play it on my end, and I'll let you guys play it on your end. And then if y'all will kind of give me some sort of like thumbs up, or we watched it, or something like that, that would be really helpful. So this is called The Heart Plays Its Part, and this is from a documentary called Heal. And if you haven't watched the documentary Heal, I highly recommend it. It's very phenomenal. It used to be on Netflix. I'm not sure if it is anymore, but I know you can look it up online and pull it up offline. So I'm going to go ahead and play this video. So if everybody is on that slide, we're going to do the heart plays its part. And so what I'm going to do is just lower my volume on my. So everyone watching that video, how amazing was that video, right? I think it's really cool that, again, just like we can have that lens that as soon as we're born, we're dying kind of thing, or as soon as we're born, we're capable of healing, right? And again, so much of that flows from that heart-centered space. And I just think it's really cool that the heart plays such an important role in that. And that it's also one of those things, again, like he was saying, that like science hasn't caught up to it yet, right? Like science hasn't had that ability to prove why we have our heartbeat first, right? And I think it is really important to recognize that that's the moment when our soul enters our body. And to have that emotional and spiritual health, especially in times of adversity, we have to remember that, right? Like we have to come back to that place. We have to come back to that remembrance that we are more than just a body. We're more than just cells. We have this spiritual side of us. We have a mental, emotional, spiritual side. And we can't just take care of one thing. We have to take care of all of it, right? We can't just go to the doctor and eat our fruits and veggies and, do all these things. We have to also pay attention and be attuned to our spiritual and emotional self. But same as, vice versa. That's why it's so important for us to bring it all together, is that we can't just pay attention to our spiritual self, because then we neglect our body, which again, then it becomes this vicious cycle, right? I had on the next slide, there's just a couple of scriptures and quotes that I had there for you guys. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Yes, that's what I'm showing on the next slide, Lynn. Perfect. I love it. So Matthew 6:21, it says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So those things that we value as important to ourselves, right? That is showing us the wellspring of our heart, right? And then Proverbs 4:23, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life, which is very real and true. I mean, even as that video just showed, is that your heart is the first organ to develop. And when we don't guard it, when we don't take care of it, it's the thing that's literally determining the course of our life, right? C.S. Lewis says, if I find in myself a desire in which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. And then 2 Corinthians 4:16-18 says, that is why we never give up. Though our bodies are dying, our spirits are being renewed every day. For our present troubles are small and won't last very long. Yet they produce for us, I mistyped in here. They produce something that vastly outweighs them and will last forever. So we don't look at the trouble we can see now. Rather, we fix our gaze on the things that cannot be seen. For the things we see now will soon be gone, but the things we cannot see will last forever. And again, I just think that goes back into that spiritual attunement, that ability to recognize that like our things that we're so stressed about here in 2020, these things that are causing us so much unrest and negativity and arguments with people, those are things that don't last, right? And so we have to be able to sit with the things within ourselves. Whatever your belief system is, you have to be able to connect to that peace in order to know that you're doing okay, right? You have to be able to connect to that peace in order to know that you can make it on to the next day. I was reading a book by a functional medicine doctor one time. Her name is Dr. Sandra Dalton Smith, and she talks a lot about rest and what does that look like. And I think when we're thinking about taking care of ourselves emotionally and spiritually, we have to be able to tune into that idea of rest. But she actually really defines it in a different way. She kind of breaks rest down into 7 different categories. So if you go to the next slide, it says rest during unrest. What is rest? And if you guys are interested, I didn't necessarily want to take a ton of time right now to do it because I wanted to have enough time for us to, keep moving through this. But there is a quiz that you can take for yourselves. It's just at the website restquiz.com. Seems simple enough, right? But if you go on restquiz.com, you'll take a little, questionnaire, multiple choice questionnaire, and it basically will give you your scores of how unrested, or what I like to say is unrejuvenated, certain areas of your life may be. She breaks down these categories again into the mental, physical, spiritual, creative, social, sensory, and emotional. So if you're looking at your scores when you take this quiz, basically the higher your score is in a certain area, the more that area might need attention. The more that area might need some attunement or some rejuvenation, right? So basically, she kind of, and when you get the email of your results, it'll give you like a quick little definition of each category of rest and how to identify what it really means. But if I was going to give you an example, it might be like, for instance, one that I was kind of confused about when I first took the quiz was that my physical rest score was actually really high. And as a therapist who sits in a chair all day talking to people and listening to their stories and their problems and everything going on, I was very confused. I was like, why is my physical rest score so high? But really it was because I was not doing anything to cultivate tension relieving activities in my body. And for me being stable and stationary, I need at the end of my day to do some sort of movement in order to make my body feel healthy and whole. So again, it kind of feels a little backwards sometimes when we're looking at it, but if you can really pay attention to, again, how high it is, and then get in your mind, okay, I want to rejuvenate this area. How do I rejuvenate that area to cultivate rest, right? So again, you guys can kind of do that on your own, but just need for time, I just want to move on to the next slide. That's intentionality. So when we're thinking again about, having that emotional health, that spiritual health, I think there's kind of a little bit of a process that we have to go through together and individually so that you can heal that area, so that you can cultivate emotional rest or spiritual rest, right? And I think intentionality is kind of like the big overall arching thing that we have to pay attention to, right? We have to be intentional about taking care of our emotional and spiritual selves, because if we're not, it's not going to happen. And we have to engage in the process. We have to make a plan. We have to be engaged in it for anything to change. We live in a world, I feel like often, that tells us that we should be able to just kind of sit back and let things happen to us, or like, let's just see how the cards play out, But life doesn't happen that way. Like, everything is very intentional. Everything is designed very intentionally, right? The way the way our earth works is very specific in nature. Everything from water cycles to the moon phases to, it's all very intentional. And if one of those pieces, kind of falls out of line, then we have to work, like, just like we're working really now with our earth, right? To do things like recycling and reusing things and cultivating less waste. Like, we have to be intentional in that, or else our earth is just going to continue to hurt, right? It's the same kind of thing with our spiritual and emotional selves. We have to be intentional. So in our little process here, step number one that I thought was really important is just for us to build that awareness, right? Again, and that's where that rest quiz, I think, kind of comes into play, because I think when you take that quiz, you can kind of tune in to being like, oh, wow, like, maybe I didn't realize that my spiritual unrest was so high, right? Because if you don't know how out of sync you are, if you don't know what areas need attention, you can't change it. So awareness is one of the biggest keys to this. Part number two is that we are going to cultivate margin. So when I say cultivate margin, and y'all can, again, feel free to chat or ask questions, but when I say cultivate margin, we're thinking like, how you in elementary, middle, high school, right? You had to buy like the specific type of lined paper that had like it was like college ruled 180 or whatever, and it had the margin on the side, right? That margin was there for a lot of reasons, right? We had the margin on the left side of the paper so we could clip it into our binder, right? We have margin on the right so that if we run out of room in between the lines, we've got a little extra space. So when I talk about cultivating margin in our life, it's really about that ability to cultivate space, okay? And I know we all feel pressed for time and we feel pressed for people pulling at us different directions, but this is where boundaries are really, really important. So in order to cultivate margin, sometimes we have to have good boundaries. We have to be able to say, hey, Joe, sorry, I can't go to the barbecue this weekend. Like, I really need the space. I need room for myself to rest, right? Or I need room to take care of some yard work that I needed to do, right? Like, we have a society that says yes to everything all the time, and we have to learn how to take back our no's. It's not a bad thing. It's not mean. It's not harsh, but we have to learn how to take back that margin for ourselves. So cultivating margin, and then in the midst of cultivating the margin for yourself, we're going to create a plan. Some sort of plan to engage those spiritual disciplines or emotional disciplines so that you can, again, stay on top of your emotional and spiritual health, just like we have a lot of things that we do on a daily basis, right? Like, we brush our teeth, we might shower every day if you're a shower every day kind of person, or maybe you go work out every day, or maybe you eat your 3 meals a day, or whatever that looks like. Like, we have things that we do on a routine basis to take care of ourselves, right? Our emotional and spiritual selves need the same kind of attention. So we have to create the margin, cultivate the margin, and create some sort of plan of some sort of engagement in a spiritual or emotional discipline so that you can stay emotionally and spiritually healthy, especially during times of adversity. That's when we need it the most, right? We need that emotional and spiritual health even more so during those tough times. But if we don't have that practice, I always say it's better to practice off the field, right? So that when you're in the game, when you're on the field, you know what to do, you know the plan, you know how to use your skills, your muscle memory kicks in, right? But if we don't practice off the field in our emotional and spiritual health, when it comes time to times of adversity, that's going to be a really tough time to start, right? Because we're not going to understand the purpose behind a lot of it. Once you create your plan, then we're going to need to engage routinely. So again, not just something that you do a plan one weekend out of the year to like rejuvenate yourself, but something that has to be like a routine basis for you. And then you'll just start to notice the difference, right? So when you're engaging in this stuff routinely, just notice the difference in what's happening for you, what's happening for your perspective, what's happening in your body, quite literally. Again, that documentary Heal, that little bit that we watched, they talk so much about our emotional and spiritual health and how even when we're engaging in that stuff routinely and taking care of ourselves, our atoms and our cells are quite literally working together to heal us. And it is just like so cool. I get really jazzed and kind of geek out over some of these things. So on the next slide, I have listed some spiritual and emotional disciplines for you guys. And I wasn't sure if you guys had any extra. If you have extra ones that you do engage in, I would love for you to just kind of throw it up in the chat and we can kind of talk about it or share it with everybody. But under the spiritual disciplines, basically we have things like prayer, meditations. So if you've never done a meditation before, meditations are a great way to have some intentional focus for yourselves. Then we have journaling, Lectio Divina. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of a Lectio Divina before, but Lectio Divina is kind of a way of reading scripture in a step-by-step process. So in a Lectio Divina, you would first pray. You would allow yourself to invite the Spirit to join you in whatever it is you're about to read. Then you would read, and you would, as you're reading, kind of listen, or you read it out loud and kind of linger over the things that stand out to you. Then you would meditate on it. You would take time to pause. You would reflect on what you just read, think about any significance that's standing out to you. Then you would respond. So responding would be maybe, again, reading out loud or praying out loud again in response to whatever it is you just read. Maybe you ask questions of God, maybe you ask him to reveal new things to you. And then the last step is just to, again, contemplate. And you can kind of take that part with you into your day-to-days, letting that passage sink in, letting you, kind of ask yourself, well, how am I supposed to apply this to my life, right? Another spiritual discipline that's really important, I think, is solitude. Again, a lot of times our world is like, we need to be connected to everybody all the time, but solitude is really important. Having time away, having time by yourself to process. Again, it kind of helps cultivate that margin, right? And then fasting. So if you guys have ever done any kind of fasting, that can be another great way to tune into God and what he's trying to teach you. So in fasting, you're not just like not eating for a set amount of time. You're using that time during maybe not eating or giving up whatever it is you want to give up, whether it's social media fasting or, again, food, or maybe you give up hanging out with friends for a week, just because maybe you do need that solitude time. But during the times where you feel stressed by this, you would need to then use that time as prayer during your fasting so that you can, again, reconnect to the purpose of it. The emotional disciplines we have listed, again, awareness building. We can't be emotionally intelligent or sound if we're not aware of what we've got going on for ourselves, right? Another emotional discipline is being honest. Again, our society tells us that we should be tolerant of everyone all the time. We should keep our opinions to ourselves a lot, right? Or we should be really dramatic about it. But even sometimes in the dramatization of our emotions, we're not being honest, right? So we have to take a second to be honest with ourselves. A mind dump is something really awesome that I love to tell my clients to do. Basically, a mind dump is allowing yourself to take a piece of paper, take a pen, and you would set a timer on your phone. It could be for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever you got going on. And you would just allow kind of stream of consciousness thought, but you're really following one thought after the other. So they may not make sense. They may not feel correlated, but you're, again, allowing your brain to connect brain to pen to paper, to write down one thought at a time. It could be, I'm sitting in a presentation right now, and then you could write down, my feet are really cold, or I really am excited about my trip this weekend. I mean, it could be a lot of different things, but you're trying to allow yourself to follow one thought after the other. And sometimes in doing a mind dump, you kind of recognize, oh, maybe there's some themes here, or oh, maybe my brain really is thinking about something in particular. Then the next one, externalization. I think that goes with the mind dump and being honest, is we have to be able to externalize those thoughts, those feelings that we have going on, because if we don't, those become lies or stories that we're telling ourselves that usually aren't very helpful, right? So externalizing is a way of helping your brain almost kind of hear or relearn what it is that you were just saying. And sometimes when your brain hears it out loud, you are able to rationalize a little bit better. Or if it sees it out loud, right? So, and I say see it out loud by writing it on paper and then you're reading it back. Your brain is able to then receive that information, understand it in a more logical way half the time, and then create a new plan around it. But if we just keep it inside, usually it ends up being kind of half thoughts or half feelings. We don't actually play through what's going on for ourselves. Authentic expression, again, goes with being honest, being vulnerable in that. And then even in emotional disciplines and being vulnerable, we have to still cultivate this place of non-judgment of ourselves, right? We have to be able to take a step back and recognize it's okay that maybe you feel crummy today. It's okay that maybe there's a lot of stress going on, but you're going to get over it and move through and navigate to something a little bit better for yourself, right? Or it's okay that maybe you have a friend who's always positive Polly all the time, and that's just how she wants to be. That's okay too, right? I mean, it's okay, the emotions that we have, and in our experience of practicing non-judgment and acceptance, we oftentimes can recognize that those emotions aren't going to last forever, right? And so that's what makes it okay, is that we're human and we're allowed to feel things minute by minute. It's okay to not have one emotion all the time. It's okay to have ups and downs. It's okay to navigate through those, okay? This next slide that I have is a C.S. Lewis quote from the Chronicles of Narnia. I don't know if you guys have ever read that book or watched the movie or anything, but I just feel like this kind of speaks to our ability to remember and our ability to navigate through different times of adversity, and again, kind of cultivating that margin so that we don't become confused, or so that we don't kind of get misdirected or misguided, right? So this quote from the Chronicles of Narnia says, "But first remember the signs. Say them to yourself when you wake in the morning and when you lay down at night and when you wake in the middle of the night. And whatever strange things may happen to you, let nothing turn your mind from following the signs. And secondly, I give you a warning. Here on the mountain, I have spoken to you clearly. I will not often do so in Narnia, but here on the mountain, the air is clear and your mind is clear. And as you drop down into Narnia, the air will thicken. Or you could equate that to as you move into society, right? It becomes more convoluted and complex. But take great care that it does not confuse your mind, and the signs which you have learned here will not look at all as you expect them to look when you meet them there. That is why it is so important to know them by heart and pay no attention to appearances. Remember the signs and believe the signs. Nothing else matters. Oh, how important is that for us to be able to like tune in again to that emotional, spiritual side to recognize it. Not all this other stuff, this stuff in the world that is tangible, our, you know, our house, our car, our job, our, you know, that stuff is important, but it's not all of who you are. It's not the essence of who you are. Your soul is the essence of who you are. Your emotional and spiritual self is the essence of who you are. And we have to take care of that piece of us, you know? So I know we're supposed to kind of wrap up by 9:45-ish, and I know I want to, you know, leave some time for questions or thoughts or comments. But I do have a little practice here. I'm not going to do all of the practice for us, but I will kind of just quickly highlight all the practice points, and maybe you can practice these throughout your day today. The first practice that I love to do to kind of create space and margin is what I call a take 5 for my clients. So it's super simple, super easy. We're going to take 5 deep breaths together. And I like to use this time at one as a transition time. It can be a great way because, again, when we don't have margin, when we don't have room to process or think, that's when we get convoluted. That's when the air becomes thick, right? And we can't remember what our purpose was. So in transitional times, maybe this is like before you get out of your car going to the next event, or maybe it's in between projects at work, or maybe it is between this presentation and the next that you're going to tune into today. Take 5 is a simple way of spending less than 30 seconds checking in with yourself. So what I want all of us to do here in this space, one, pay attention to what your body feels like now. You know, maybe you feel rushed, maybe you feel like you're going from one thing to the next. But just pay attention to it. And then I would love for everyone to just close their eyes and gently, you know, kind of settle into your body. And we're going to take 5 slow breaths together. So we're going to inhale nice and slow through our nose. Exhaling even slower through our mouth. And 4 more just like it. Inhaling nice and slow. Exhaling even slower. And then you can open your eyes when you're done, noticing how your body feels here in this space. And that can be all the time your brain needs to catch up. That can be all the time that your brain needs to understand that you're closing this one door and opening the next one for your day, right? It can be all the time your brain needs to not carry the baggage of that last event in with you to the next event, or the baggage from that last conversation into your next conversation, right? A simple take 5, it takes less than 30 seconds and allows you guys the opportunity to, again, practice for yourselves and transition slowly, creating that margin so that you can tune in to what you emotionally and spiritually feel moment by moment. And then a mind dump, you guys can practice a mind dump after you know, this segment, if you would like, or prayer and journal. So maybe you do both at once, right? Praying is maybe you're praying as you're journaling, maybe you're writing out your prayers. But I just highly encourage you guys to create the margin first so that you can build awareness to tune into what is it that you emotionally and spiritually need. And again, maybe you go back in and take that rest quiz for yourself just to see where you're at with all of it, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And if you guys have any questions at all, like even after this presentation, if you want to, the next slide has like some contact information. If you want to email me or just check out the Madewell Center website, feel free to do so. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram, the Madewell Center on Instagram. But I would love to like kind of open the floor now. Thank you guys so much for everything. Again, if you want to contact me, reach out, madewellcenter.org. We have a calendar of events also on there where you can sign up for. We have very small group yoga classes that are 4-person max. We do a holy yoga class where you can kind of get scripture, prayer, all that stuff, and then other like Pilates and trauma-informed yoga classes. So feel free to check out the calendar on there and sign up for anything that you would like to sign up for. And then again, just feel free to reach out if you have questions, info@madewellcenter.org. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.